Good morning. We're reviewing the conclusion of Ayin Beis. We are on the bottom of page 1400, Aleph Tov. To review what we've learned yesterday in the previous classes, we've gone back to the main theme, namely Eir Hariyah, vision, eyesight, that began on page 1352 with the idea that the very eyes that we're blessed with, our vision, is obviously God created that in order for us to be able to see and perceive things in the clearest possible way. When you hear something or you touch it, or the other senses definitely allow you to experience it as well in different ways, but clarity, light, total transparency is the real power of vision. However, there are limitations because it's in the soul within a body, the power of vision within the eye, physical eye, and the limitation, therefore, is that we cannot see in the dark without an outside light. We can't see infinite distances. There's a limit to the distance, as we've learned. But the etzem koyach hariyah is fundamentally a clarity. Like he said, it comes from Chochma. Chochma is about clarity. Before he called it behirus be'etzem, crystal clear on its own. In Bina, you really need to clarify things. That's what he explained with Talmud, was clarifying and understanding things that are not totally transparent. So the ultimate goal of Riyah is to see things completely clearly. However, we understand that in this physical world, what we see right now is physicality, and spirituality is a little more distant from us, meaning not as accessible. The goal is that our eyes and our very beings, our very mind, our very psyches, our entire consciousness should be so saturated and so refined that we will see godliness itself, ruchnius itself. I mean, just to use a physical example, when you look at your phone or a computer screen, you see letters. But we all know those letters are just for the eye, for the physical eye. Behind those letters lies programming, and layers of programming, to the point of zeros and ones. We don't see the zeros and ones. But those that are really familiar with what makes it tick, it's like someone who sees they see the result, but they don't see the cause behind it. Like a good doctor, we'll see the symptoms, and a good doctor, a trained doctor, will see the causes. So on a deeper level, the same idea is that we talk about the world as being like the God's art. And we know there's an artist, but we don't see the artist. But slowly, as we learn more and we refine ourselves more, we come to become familiar with the artist to the point of Riyah, which we'll talk about more about what the Riyah will look like in the ultimate future. But for now, that's the process of Avedas. So when you begin to learn something, we're learning Ayin Beis like that. You learn Aleph Beis. When a child learns Aleph Beis, someone's a beginner, so they learn the letters. The letters then form words. The words form sentences, and then paragraphs, and chapters, and volumes, and books, and ideas, and so on. So initially, you're beginning, what do you see? You see the outer dimension. You see the letters. After a while, when you read a page, you don't even look at the letters. You're looking at what they mean. The oyer within the keli. So initially, our sight is the keli. But ultimately, you start seeing the oyer, the concept. And not just the concept, the spirit of the concept, between the lines, the emotions, the feelings conveyed, the concepts conveyed. Just to give examples, so we grow, this is how we grow, to the point that we begin to see actually the ideas more than the letters. Even though the letters are tangible, you look at the page, you see letters, you don't see ideas. But we all understand when you start reading it, what jumps out at you, what remains with you is what concept did it convey. So in a sense, the same idea, the physical world is the shell, the letters, or the art that God created, and we peer inside and gaze, using specifically words, vision words, in order to be able to see the inner dimensions. Question is how far you go, and that's the growth of a human being. And you should be growing every day and every moment to see clearer and clearer. That's called seeing the truth, seeing clarity. You live in a fog or clouded, or it's dark, Darkness is ignorance. When a person gains information, researches, they're piercing the darkness with light. And the light provides the clarity. And the question again, not the question, the process is one of constant growth to the point where you get total clarity. Total clarity would be complete seamlessness between the Ur and the Keli. Now we understand that takes time and that takes work. And in many ways you can say that Avodas, Abirurim, Birurim means clarity, to clarify. Levarer, Birurim, Talmud, earlier we learned, captures that concept, how a human being, how scholars go and find clarity in a place where they don't have clarity. Mishnah was more of a Gili Momaila, Ish Mipi Ish. They also needed to study it, but the clarity was there where they were on a higher level. Obviously, as we go through the generations in Golas, the darker it gets, that's why we need even more light and more effort to break through and counter the darkness by illuminating it. Look at today's world. We were talking about propaganda, false narratives. You need to have wisdom and you need to have light in a dark world like this. So, point being, bottom line is, just trying to put it into more practical terms, the ideas that we're learning here. So, in the language of Ayin Beis here, is that Ur Hariyah is essentially Einei Ha'eda, the leaders, Sanhedrin, the leaders, as the Zohar says, well, the Pasuk says, Einei Ha'eda, the Zohar explains, just like eyes guide and lead the entire person, so the same thing, the eyes of Einei Ha'eda, of the community, of the nation, of the people, are their guides. They provide clarity and direction to each one of us. And that's why they were Mesakin brachas. Because the idea of a bracha, a blessing, as he explained, is Baruch Hashem Elikei Elam, Mina Elam Ada Elam. Baruch Hashem, like he said at the bottom of page 1399. Baruch Hashem Elikei Yisrael, rather, Mina Elam Ba'ada Elam. Revealing that which is in the hidden world, Mina Elam, discussing the hidden worlds into the revealed world. And as he continued to bring different sources throughout page 1400, that the Zohar says that a bracha is mamshech from Arichampin, from Kesed, all the way from Atik, which is concealed, into Atzilus, into the Moichin, and ultimately into Zun. So therefore the Yichud that it creates is a Yichud, what he says is B'chinas Histaklus and Riyah, where you're gazing upon, whether the teacher is gazing on the student or the mashpia is gazing on the makabel, and the makabel is gazing at the teacher, and that creates a very profound union that only sight has. It's like when you see someone that you love, as much as you talk to them, as much as you can relate to them, you can write to each other, but there's something, when you meet someone you love, there's something that's added that's hard to fully explain, but there's something about sight that creates a deeper intimacy. And as I said, to the point that by the Basa Ayana, the ostrich, it actually conceives. The gaze itself conceives Efreich, as he brought from the Eitz Chaim. So you see what he called Histaklus Ariyah is Mamoshes. So even though in some places in Kabbalah, in Eitz Chaim, it brings that Riyah is not quite the same level as the other cavities, Ezen Chetem Peh, the ears, the nose, the mouth, and it seems to be more of a reflection, but at the same time, it has something that the other senses don't have, something Mamoshes. You could actually see tangibly something in the fullest sense of the word. That's the Yichud. Erari is a er atzmi. So b'chinas istakos the arachapin mishachem meichen lezun lias b'chinas yichud bezun, and that's what means that the chachamim they were the ones mesakim birchas hamitzvos, because a mitzvah is the yichud, and the bracha adds the gili to it. That it's not just like we learned earlier from Tataah, that it's not just a munah, faith, which can be more abstract or more detached, but a faith like be'efen. He said ki'ilu roya. Not just you believe, but it's as if you see it. And sight creates a whole nother level of resonance, of a resonating truth. So that's the gili that they are mamshech through bracha. That's where we stopped at the end of the paragraph, page 1400, with a little explanation, making a little more practical the whole concept. Now he's going to continue now explaining what bracha is, and the relevance, as I mentioned the other day, why I'm really think is critical we read this, because you'll see this language here that we're going to learn later is similar language to what happens when we say Shema Yisrael, the Yechuda Ilaah and Yechuda Tataah, which are also essentially different levels of perception of the divine. Is it on our terms? Is it on God's terms? And all the different ideas that we've learned. Now, keep in mind as well that the higher you go, the less you can actually see. You can hear about it. That's why we said Chacham Adaf Menavi. Wisdom can go further than vision, because vision, you would be blinded if you're going too high. That's why it says a person can't. Moshe Rabbeinu saw a certain level, but he saw it. So the next generations, lower souls, don't see as clearly as Moshe, but they can reach through Chochma to higher levels, as we learned. So it's not a contradiction, because we're talking here that we want the best of both worlds, to actually see it, and it should be internalized. And for that, obviously, requires the Avodah that I described, the birur, the clarity, the refinement that helps us get to those higher levels. Now, ready to continue, new paragraph on bottom of page 1400. And where this is leading to is that the Eine Ha'eda B'Koyach HaTeira, the eyes, together with the Siyua of the light of Teira, Siyua, because we need the Teira to illuminate the way, that will provide us direction and guidance. But he's going to still continue a little more about the Eine Ha'eda now. So he says, Va'inyan hu. The inyan in this, explaining this idea of bracha and the eyes of the people, he says like this. Inyan hu, and the pages, if you want to follow the text, can be found at ayinbeis.com. Oh, by the way, yesterday when we were talking about seeing the sights, seeing the sounds and hearing the sights, I was looking for the word, was synesthesia. I think someone pointed it out on the chat as well. Synesthesia is a condition where there are people who have that crossing of the wires, where they actually see sounds. When there's a sound, they see visuals, and they hear sights, meaning when they see a sight, that actually causes something, they hear some audible. And it's been studied, and a very fascinating study, but it's basically what he said earlier in Ayin Beis, because at the root, sight and sound in the Koyches HaNefesh, not as they manifest in the eye and the ear, for most of us, they are separate faculties or separate senses. But in the root, they cross over and they become like one. But again, that's a higher level of experience that by Matan Torah was a one-time thing. At this point, we're talking how it manifests within the structures of existence. So you do have a distinction between sight and sound. Okay, going back to now where we are. Va'inyan hu. The inyan of this is, it's going to explain bracha on a higher level now. The bracha b'chinas Yechuda Ilaah. Bracha is the level of Yechuda Ilaah. Remember, it's the Yichud Elyon that's higher than Atzilus, because bracha is being mamshich, be said from the Sheresh Shemokar, the Zohar says, of Mokera Dechaya, which is in Keser. Or later he said, Atika Kadisha, Stima Dechol Stimen. So it's Yechuda Ilaah Shazel b'chinas Gilui. So let me just explain that briefly. We know there's two levels of Yichud. Yechuda Tataah, Yechuda Ilaah. Generally, it's Shema Yisrael is Yechuda Ilaah, Baruch Shem is Yechuda Tataah. In Shema Yisrael, we've learned in the Maimer, Mika Hashem Elokeinu Magbil Hashavas, there's also both levels, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu, and the last Hashem Echad. Briefly, the difference between them is, Yechuda Tataah, as its name implies, like Das Tachten, is the perspective from below. Meaning, Yechuda Tataah, we look at existence, you see the art, and you realize the art was created by an artist. And it's really one with the artist. It's just an expression of the artist. But that's like within the context of existence, you recognize the yichud of existence with its source. Yechuda Ilaah is looking at it from the bird's eye view from the source itself, where existence is not there yet. Yes, he can create existence, but the real focus is that God is one, like we've learned before the creation, just like after the creation, just like before the creation, a total bittul, which means there's nothing that exists. All that exists is godliness. Now, the Eibishter wanted both, because he wants existence. And in our Seder of Aveda, Momata Lamaila, from the bottom up, obviously we go with Yechuda Tataah first, and then Yechuda Ilaah. So if you think in terms of clarity, vision, Yechuda Tataah is a clarity that you're recognizing the divine within existence. It's like recognizing the producer within the product. But it's the product that you're focusing on and the producer within the product. When you look at the producer, beyond being a producer, the essence of the very source of the divine is much clearer because you're seeing God without any filters, without any of even as he manifests within Mamala Kalam and within Asara Mamoris Nivra Elam. So you see, he Rakia. So yes, you're recognizing the divine words that are vivifying, that are energizing and creating existence. But when you're talking about the Ilaah, you're talking about the God beyond existence. And there, it's a pure, clear picture just of the divine truth and the divine emes. That's one way to explain it. I mean, there are many ways you could add, many more details you can add to it. So he's saying Yechuda Ilaah is a bechinas gilui, and that's why bracha is connected to Yechuda Ilaah. V'heidah, so bracha and heidah are two different forms. Bracha is amshaka begili. Heidah means you acknowledge. You say moida ani. It's not quite. Baruch means I'm drawing down, I'm revealing the divine within, whether it's the mitzvah or the object or the food or whatever it is that you're making a blessing on. Heidah means I'm acknowledging. I say thank you. Moida, I acknowledge you. Moidim or heidu or moida ani. Ubchinas das tachten. That's a level of das tachten because you're not directly relating to it. What you're doing is you're acknowledging it. So it's more like from a distance. So it's a level of das tachten. Ay mashakosa b'dibra maschem mizmer l'seida. So now it brings yet another mimer. That look in the mimer mizmer l'seida. I'm just looking if I don't think he mentioned it before. Okay. But the focus here is bracha. So sometimes you'll see bracha and heidah, two levels. We talked about bracha and tefillah, but here we're talking about heidah. Ubrichas ha-mitzvahs, shahu liyas yichud zun, and when you make a bracha ha-mitzvahs, you say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam, asher kedeshanu b'mitzvahs v'tzvanu la'aniach tefillin, let's say. So he says that bracha is in order to achieve a union. Liyas yichud zon malchus kutsha bricha. You say Baruch Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam. So there you have Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam asher kedeshanu. So you're creating a yichud of zon malchus like we learned before. Sheti amshach b'bchinas malchus. Because malchus on its own, it's in a concealed level. You mentioned this a few lines earlier. B'chinas hester v'helam. And the bracha is bringing it revealed. Baruch atah. You're saying, Baruch, you are blessed. You are drawing down in a revealed way the divine in that level of malchus. Because malchus is Yechuda Tataah. That's the last of the spheres as it manifests and relates. Like I said, Asara Mamoris Nivra malchus relates and creates biyah, the lower worlds. But in the process, it's concealing the divine. It's there. So it's Yechuda Tataah. When you're mamshech a bracha into it from Keser, see, you're revealing the higher levels of the divine, what he called before, from B'china Riyah, there you're being mamshech Yechuda Ilaah into Yechuda Tataah. So those are the dynamics of what the Chachamim achieve when they establish brachas. Is the amshach of Yechuda Ilaah into Yechuda Tataah. Or on its own, it would only be Yechuda Tataah on our level. Before the Anshe Knesset Gdeilah, even without a bracha, they were able to achieve that type of clarity. But now, in the Bayis Sheni, after Bayis Sheni, you need to have the Chachamim to designate these brachas. Shegam b'chinas Yechuda Tataah, that also the lower level that defines godliness on basic, the godliness commensurate and relating to existence, yeh b'chinas gili er, should be in a state of clarity, of a revelation. Not just the producer concealed within the product, the artist within the art, but seeing the artist like in full glory, like you're seeing him face to face. So exactly that. You look at a product, you look at, say, a building or a piece of art. So there you could extrapolate there's an artist, but it doesn't compare seeing the artist himself directly. Remember, I pointed out all the sources he's bringing. You see, he's just adding more. This is, as I said, time to time in Ayin Beis, you'll see the Rebbe Rashab collecting many different sources. So yet a few more Maimorim he throws into the picture. in the Siddur Shar Birchas Hamazon and Likutei Torah Dibur HaMasel V'Achalto V'Savoto, a Maimer in Ekev, Parshat Ekev. Now, what does he talk about there? Be'inyan Birchas Ha'aretz. There he talks about Birchas Ha'aretz, meaning the blessings we make on the food from the earth. V'zeu hamshachim b'bchinas ha'chochma b'bchinas malchus. So it originates from Keser, but it's going through Riyah as a level of Chochma, which in turn be mamshich Chochma into malchus uliyas ha'gili lamato, and that it should cause that the gili should then come down lamato, not remain over there. So you could have it through amunah, faith, or heidah, acknowledgement, which is similar to like faith in this context, or you could have it in a revealed way, and that's what a bracha does. V'zeu gamkein, and now he's associating what we learned earlier. Sha'amunah yiyeh ki'ilu roya. Remember on the third line of the page, fourth line rather, he said in the Maimer, so this is like the amunah, as if you're seeing it, not just you believe it. Faith meaning you don't see it, but you accept it. It brings us back to the Maimer Kisisa on the fifth line of the page. This is a parenthesis, just a few lines. Like it says elsewhere, says, raise your eyes to heaven and see. See. Who created all of this? So we see from that, it's a level of Riyah, not just amunah faith. And so too, we learned earlier about the isbonnus, that you can have isbonnus in machshava alone, but then it's more abstract, it's more theoretical. But here the isbonnus is in the form of riyah, as if you're seeing it, and it actually pierces and touches you in the very core of your soul. Whereas the isbonnus and machshava we learned earlier, if you go back to the top of the page, you'll see the Maimer Veschanan that it's only a machshava that doesn't pierce nekudas halev. Mashenk b'chinas gili negeil atzmus mamsh. The kol ze yesh lemer. So though he didn't say it explicitly, the Rebbe Rashab is saying that all that which we learned earlier, we can now apply what we just learned. That's Yechuda Ilaah is providing the clarity of the Riyah. Yechuda Tataah is the experience on the lower level. It could be two separate experiences, but the bracha connects these two. Is mamshech Yechuda Ilaah into Yechuda Tataah. So he's basically connecting what we learned earlier with what he brought here, about Yechuda Ilaah. So in other words, Riyah is not just a deeper resonance that you see something, till now you heard about it, or you believed in it, now you see it. It's much more than that. It's not just you see it, it's actually a revelation of a higher level of the divine, Yechuda Ilaah. So the Hamshach itself is Chochma and Malchus, but what's the root of it is the Histaklus, the gazing, like he said, of Arich Hampin down below, like he said, and Chochma to Arich Hampin. We brought what we learned earlier. Like say, Staklus Abba ve'ima, Izun, ba'arich Hampin, Staklus Arich Hampin behem. So it's the gazing that they connect and they bond intimately in that fashion. Let's go a few more lines and then I'll stop if anybody wants me to clarify anything. V'zehu shachachomim einei ha'eda. And this is the meaning of what we're discussing here, that the sages, the scholars who are called einei ha'eda, the eyes, that's what eyes provide, clarity of vision. Tiknu habrachas, that they establish the blessings because they have that power, because of they are einei ha'eda, that power of Riyah, they establish the blessings which create this clarity of Riyah into Abishach Yechuda Ilaah, into Yechuda Tataah. Let me stop here if anybody wants me to, any questions or wants to clarify things, and then we'll read on.
This is impossible. I have a question. I don't know if
mean,
Rabbi Taitan
practically
can mute.
broken. I understand. I understand with Chochma Yoedot, but bracha, a average person that is saying bracha is bringing down this Yechuda law in Yechuda Tataah, in Malchus.
I, I mean, if you're talking about an average person says a bracha, I don't know, it's probably be mamsheh, but most people just say, they don't even think about it. He's saying how a bracha should be said, not how people actually say it. I mean, everything is relative. Obviously, when a Rebbe says a bracha on a mitzvah, you saw the Rebbe when he was Masada Kedushin, or he made other brachas, Havdalah, Kiddush, and so on, or for that matter, Shefer. I've heard many people make brachas on blowing Shefer. But when you heard the Rebbe make the bracha, you could tell right away it was a different level, right? So obviously, it all depends on the person. Someone saying a bracha on that level, you could literally say they're being mamshech Yechuda Ilaah, Yechuda Tataah. For the rest of us, meaning Anoshim Karkenu, we have a me'ein zeh. That's the expression we usually use. It's a taste of it. Relatively, every one of us has to look at where you're at. The mitzvah is the hamshach itself. The mitzvah is the actual yichud of Zon Malchus. The bracha is meant to bring it in a more gilidik way. So let's put it this way: when you're saying the bracha, you don't just do the mitzvah. You make the bracha. It's revealing more. And if you're thinking and concentrating a bit on the kavanah, relatively speaking, it's hamshach of a higher level of a lakus into a lower level. Which, in bigger term, in a larger context, that's Yechuda Ilaah, Yechuda Tataah. That's like asking in general if Shema Yisrael is Yechuda Ilaah and Baruch Shem is Yechuda Tataah. Do all of us experience? I mean, most people when they say Shema and they say Baruch Shem, it's pretty much the same madrege. But that's more because we're not thinking about it or concentrating. You learn Chassidus, there is the kavanah is different. One is the kavanah speaking about God, like Eined Mulvade, that's Yechuda Ilaah. The other is speaking within my existence. I'm recognizing like echad in Tes and Dalad of the seven heavens and earth and the Dalad Ruchis, the four directions. I recognize Alufi Shalelam. I recognize the artist within the art. It's more of a bonus within existence, seeing godliness. That's the way it's meant to be. So relatively speaking, it's Yechuda Tataah, Yechuda Ilaah, each person according to their level.
So I had a question. Actually, Rabbi Taito asked most of my questions, so this is a little bit of a follow-up. First of all, two parts. First of all, the Dibur Hamasko Mizmor LeDavid, sorry, Mizmor LeSoda. Where is that mimer? I've been looking since he said that. I can't find it anywhere. It's not an Ayin Beis. It seems.
No, it's not
It's
Ayin Beis.
it's not the. It doesn't seem like. Well, let me just say I couldn't find it, but I need the Rebbein
It's
so
probably
far.
Likutei Torah.
Okay.
I don't have it right in front of me the Sefer, but it's probably Likutei Torah. I would assume it's Likutei Torah or the Siddur. But it's Siddur, he's mentioning Siddur here.
Okay.
Probably it's not difficult to find.
Okay. I'll look harder. The substantive question is
I
it
go to say if you
recently.
go to Sefer Likutim
Uh,
in the entry on Haidah, you probably find there. He'll tell you where exactly it is.
okay. Thank you. Um, on this issue, it occurred to me recently that they say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu. So we have the Shem Havaya and the Shem Elokim together, almost like in the Vayadaita Hayom Hashavasa Lavacha Ki Hashem Elokim V'Shama. So is it the same notion there? Can one, if one wants to have a kavana to do this yichud when they're saying a bracha, is that an accurate contemplation?
Yeah, in general terms, yes.
Okay. And the other thing is, I mean, I think again, this question is probably not a good question, but um, when we're saying a bracha, we're trying to bring some elokus into our existence. Essentially, well, we're acknowledging the source of elokus, but we're also trying to bring elokus into the place where we're at. So, in some sense, just from a hashkafic perspective, from where you look at, it seems like you're looking at it from the bottom up, but whereas Yichud Ilaah is from the top down. So I'm having a hard time in my mind thinking when you're saying a bracha, which is a lot about us, about our reality, seeing the Yichud Ilaah, which is from the top down. I do understand the issue of Yichud in general, Yichud Shem Havaya with Yichud Shem Elokim, but I don't know if you understand the thrust of my question. It just seems a bracha is so heavily focused on our reality that it's hard to see the Yichud Ilaah in that notion. When you say
why do you say it's if a person, let's say, takes a piece of food, that's our reality, and they make a bracha, the bracha is the divine reality.
Uh-huh.
You're acknowledging God in it. So but ultimately a bracha has several aspects to it. It has the main focus here is wants to say the very concept of a bracha is drawing down a higher level of elikus into a lower level.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's very helpful.
And it's all relative,
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Very helpful.
Okay. Now again, there is going to be somewhat of a nuanced, I guess you could say, going a little more into details, but we'll just go through it quickly. So to continue on, B'Likutei Torah, he says now, Dav achalta hanal, Dibra Masel, the achalta maimer, the liyas b'chinas bitla yesh Yechuda Tataah, Ushanim shem b'chinas Chochma Ilaah, b'chinas Yechuda Ilaah, what's that? The liyas b'chinas bitla yesh. One second, let me just read that. Okay, the parenthesis is going to be a little, I don't know, the truth is I probably should skip it, but I'll just read it quickly. Let me just add another point here that's vital. Another manifestation of Yechuda Tataah and Yechuda Ilaah is sometimes referred to Bitla Yesh and Bitla B'Mitzias. So Bitla Yesh means there's a Yesh, and you're acknowledging, more than acknowledging, you are sublimating it to Elikus, but there's a Yesh. Bitla Mitzias is not, there's no Yesh, it's total godliness. Not a Yesh that's bottled. Like I mentioned before, you take your life. Sometimes the difference between the weekdays and Shabbos is compared to that. In the weekdays, the mitzvah is to work. Supposed to work, just like it's a mitzvah to rest on Shabbos, a mitzvah to work. And the work is done, kol masechel l'shem shamayim. You're doing it l'shem shamayim. In other words, you're working not just to work, not just to make money, but to serve God through work, through transforming this world. The money you make, you dedicate part of it to tzedakah. What was that? Kol rachecha deyu. Shabbos, kol malachta chasuya. Not supposed to do material work. The work of Shabbos is to bring the Yechul HaShamayim ba'aretz v'chol tzvam, elevate the world to a world elevate the world to a level of elikus that's higher than God relating to existence. So 6 days of the week, God actually created existence. Milided Yeta. It's like the king getting involved in building something. On Shabbos, the king goes back to his palace and he transcends Metzias Ha'elam. So in a sense, Yechuda Tataah is the work in the weekdays. Yechuda Ilaah is more on God's terms, entering the palace. In the way Elul, Melech Basada, the king is in the field. It's accessible with all the milas of that. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the Melech is in his palace. So there's difference of different levels. So one is Bitla Yesh, one is Bitla Mitzias. The Rebbe Rashab here, when you look in the Maimorim, you'll understand more what the Rebbe Rashab is saying here. He's very bekitzer. But if you look in the Maimon Likutei Torah, you'll understand he's analyzing it a bit, and he's saying the following. He says that the Maimon is telling us that because Bitla Yesh of Yechuda Tataah, Ushanim shem b'chinas Chochma b'chinas Yechuda Ilaah. that the goal here is that we want to be mamshich, that in bitla yesh should also have the revelation of bitl mitzias of Yechuda Ilaah. In other words, to have like Shabbos, the bitl of Shabbos into the weekdays, or the bitl of a higher level of Elikus into the bitla yesh of a lower level. The Liyah is b'chinas bitla yesh, tichut Tataah, v'shanim shem b'chinas Chochma Ilaah, b'chinas Yechuda Ilaah. Not just Malchus, but Chochma Ilaah, Yechuda Ilaah should be nimshach there. But Tzarech Leimer, the Rebbe Rashab is saying, we have to say on the next page, 1401, that Kavona, the intention in this is, the Liyah is b'chinas bitla yesh, b'chinas Yechuda Tataah, b'chinas bitl mamish. Now what does he mean by the words Liyah, b'chinas bitla yesh? That the level of bitla yesh should have a level of bitl mamish, not just bitla yesh. That, to give another example, there's a student and a teacher. So the student in the presence of the teacher is going to have bitla yesh because he's humbled and he stands in respect to his teacher. But that doesn't mean he's eis mitzias, because when the teacher leaves his presence, he becomes a great teacher himself. He has a bitl. So the bitl is only while he is standing in the presence of someone greater than him. But when you say that's b'chinas, when you say liyas b'chinas bitla yesh b'chinas bitl mamish, you're saying that even that bitla yesh is infused with another deeper level of bitl that is higher than the bitla yesh on its own. He's taking us back to the Maimer Veschanon, which is the Maimer he's already referred to the third time now that he's referring to this Maimer, about this bonanus in thought, and then bringing it like as if you, as in dibur, in revealed way, where it actually pierces your heart and your soul. So it's what it says in Veschanon, Liyas ruche v'neshmose elov Yasef. If you remember, he brought those words, previous page, that even though it may not completely penetrate the nefesh, because the nefesh is in the body and in the cheshech of Taivas Elam, but it does affect it, that the nefesh should be Yasef, that even the level of nefesh, which would be compared here to like Bitla Yesh and Yechuda Tataah, that it also, Ruchiv and Shmos Elov Yasef. So he's saying there that the Ruach and the Shama, the higher levels, Elov Yasef, that they are capacity to go higher than the nefesh does. So what you see here again is bringing the bittul mitzias or the Yechuda Ilaah into Yechuda Tataah. And how do you achieve that? Is when your contemplation is not just a theoretical one, but you actually can envision it, you can visualize it, which is why in Chassidus, in a number of places, the Rabbeim talk a lot about not just understanding godliness, but visualizing godliness. That just like we visualize different things, is obviously it's visualizing with our minds, but you're actually like seeing it, and that has a whole other level of clarity than just understanding it. Now, of course, you have to make sure that the seeing should be, it shouldn't be completely mugushim, meaning completely crass or coarse in physical terms, but it's like visualizing a more transcendent state. Like what we spoke before, su'u, raise your eyes to heaven and see. Even though you can't say it's mamish gilei amahus, which is revealing the very essence, like it is actually in Yechuda Ilaah in its purest form, nevertheless, there is an element that's more than just sound and understanding, or even just faith. But there's an element of clarity that's riyah. So he says this is the level of Eidah of Bina that he explains in the Maimon Mizmah L'Seida, which I'm just now going to go into right now. I think I discussed it when we learned it the first time. So he's explaining the Maimorim that when you look at the Maimorim, things are not as clear. He's explaining this is the Amshach of Yechuda Ilaah into Yechuda Tataah. The Hainu Sheyeh b'chinas Yechuda Tataah k'mo Yechuda Ilaah. The Yechuda Tataah, that the lower level of Yichud, which is more the divine as it relates to existence, should have the element of the clarity and the resonance of the truth of Yechuda Ilaah that there's nothing but the divine. Now we learned about this, you may recall, in the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer, relatively at length, and also later here in Ayin Beis, where he spoke about the Yechuda of both Yechudim. So Yechuda Tataah is one level, Yechuda Ilaah is another level. But ultimately, the Nefesh HaLekis explains to the animal soul, to the Nefesh HaBamis, that your bitl is not just a bitl yesh, that in truth, that even the bitl yesh should come to understand that the bitl mitzias, that there's nothing but God. So it's not just God on your terms, which is better than not recognizing God altogether, God forbid. You know, a person can live a selfish life and only focus on their own needs. Yechuda Tataah is at least you're aligning and saying, all my life is a blessing of God's, but you're still talking about your life. Yechuda Ilaah is that your whole life is completely nullified in the presence of God. There's nothing but godliness. And your very life is just an extension of that as well, that God allowed you that space. So it's a deeper understanding of us, of being absorbed in the divine. The difference between the Oyer that's commensurate to the Kalim and experiencing the Oyer that's higher than the Kalim. So relatively speaking, as I said, Shabbos compared to the weekdays, Yom Tov, especially Yom Tov, Simchas Torah compared to other days of the year. It's a whole other level of joy where there's nothing but godliness. We really need both, and ultimately we need the joy in both of them. So he's basically explaining Riyah as in that context, and as I said, this will be critical later when we talk the difference between Shema Yisrael and Mashpili Lirais, the Riyah that comes through Torah. That Torah Oyer is going to be higher than what the neshama achieves on its own, Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam, without Torah. And then ultimately the neshama reaches also that level. As I said, we'll discuss when we get there. So that's just give you a little preparation of what this is ultimately going to be, why it's so relevant. Okay. So we'll stop here by the period, and before I continue, any questions? Okay. Ba'atam. And now the reason Masha Chachamim B'Keicham, how do they have the power to achieve this, to establish these brachas? Remember, it's not just that they say the brachas, they actually establish them. They were masakin these brachas, they compose them. So the reason B'Keicham Lahamshich B'Chochma Ilaah B'Chochma Tataah. Now interesting, he's going now. Remember, Chochma Tataah is Malchus, Chochma Ilaah is Chochma Atzilus. He's comparing that now to Yechuda Ilaah and Yechuda Tataah. And like I said, Bittul Mitzias and Bittul Hayesh, even though he doesn't mention Bittul Mitzias. So they have the power to draw from the higher Chochma Ilaah into Chochma Tataah. What's the reason for that power? That's due to the fact Shachachamim Sharsha Mebchinas HaChochma, because they're rooted in the level of Chochma. That's why they're called Chachamim, the wise ones. They're rooted in the level of Chochma, and that is the level, if you remember, of Riyah. V'zeu she'em b'chinas einei ha'eda, and that's why they're called einei, the eyes of the people. The Riyah he mebchinas Chochma u'kanal, because Riyah comes from the level of Chochma, which is this total clarity, because it's connected to its source. So Chochma has that clarity. Yes, it's only a nekuda initially, but it has that crystal clarity. And as we discussed earlier, and now there's another name the Chachamim are called. They're called Zekeinim, the sages, or the aged ones. So he says, "V'zeu gamkin shenikroim Zekeinim." So we'll also explain why there's another name for them called Zekeinim. We call them the Zekeinim. U'kamay Ayin Ish HaZekeinim. We say the 70 men in Pasha Ba'aloischa, where it says that Moshe was semech when Hashem says "V'asalti min haruach," will emanate, will impart from your spirit upon the Ayin Zekeinim, the 70 sages. What's the meaning of the word Zaken? Ayin Ish HaZekeinim. The Zaken who shekana Chochma. Zaken is a combination of two words. Zeh shekana Chochma. Zayin, Kuf Nun. It's like somewhat of an acronym, not complete acronym. There's another name for it, like an anagram. I remember what it's called. Zaken Hu Shekona Chochma. One who's acquired wisdom. So you see here the concept of Chochma. Ukeyidua b'masha kosev atzalti min haruach shalecha. So in Parsha Balez we learned when Moshe says to Hashem, "Ma'ayin li basa," the Jews were demanding meat. So Moshe says, "Where do I have meat from?" So Atzilus explains because he's an Atzilus, and higher than Atzilus, there's no meat there. So Hashem said to him, "Gather the Zekeinim, v'atzalti, and I will impart from your spirit haruach shalecha, the spirit of the divine that's upon you. I will impart that. I will transfer that over to the Zekeinim. Shazel kedugmis Atzilus me'erein sof ha'maitzil. That's an example of Atzilus. That's where the word of Atzalti, Atzilus, comes from. So Moshe representing the levels higher than Atzilus, erein sof ha'maitzil, from the infinite divine of the emanator, emanating from there into the spheres of Atzilus. So that's what the Zekeinim are. The Zekeinim are carrying the spirit of the Maitzil, of the emanator, into the Chochma into their Chochma, and that is essentially why they have the power to be misak in the brachas, because that's who they are. They embody this level. Elsewhere it's explained, Shari Hamaitzel Meruche Shal Moshe Eina Moshe Atzmei. So here you can still say, okay, Moshe is compared to the Maitzil, to the emanator, and the Zekeinim are compared to the recipients, the emanation of Atzilus. It says elsewhere, it says the Maitzil, who's drawing from Ruchi Shal Moshe Eina Moshe Atzmei. Because if you think about it, it goes like this: there are three things here. There's the Zekeinim, there's Moshe who has the Ruach Hashem within him, and the Maitzil is saying, Hashem says, "V'asalti, I will take from your spirit and impart from that to the spirit and infuse that into the Zekeinim. Ki'im v'atzalti, I will do that." So in other words, the process is a higher level than Moshe. Hashem, who's higher than Moshe, is taking from the Ruach of Moshe and imparting that and transferring that to some extent to the Zekeinim. V'hainu, the Moshe legabe Zekeinim ke'erech ha'keser legabe eses sfiras. So this would mean that Moshe compared to the Zekeinim is like keser compared to the 10 spheres of Atzilus. Sha'keser hu ha'mamutza bein ha'maitzil el ha'natzolim, which is of course the central theme of Ayin Beis. That's keser. Keser is the interface between the maitzil, which is higher than keser, and the natzolim, the Atzilus of the 10 spheres of the world of Atzilus. So that's when you really break it down, and that's who the Zekeinim are, receiving from that level. And so too, Moshe is that level. He's the interface between Ein Sof, the infinite divine light, and the 70 sages. And this is why the Zekeinim are 70. They refer to the Zayin as 7 lower levels of the spheres. How each one encompasses 10, 7 times 10, 70. That's the number 70 sages who are receiving, because that's the receiving in Atzilus, they're receiving from Keser, from Moshe. So they're primarily, the Zekeinim are implementing it. So as the Zayin Tachtein is the 7, which are within which radiates Shemeidim. They illuminate the levels of Moichin, of Chochma and Bina. So Moshe would be the level of Keser, who's drawing from the levels that are higher, Ein Sof, higher than that, Batzalti, and that Keser is going into the 7 Midas times 10, which are essentially drawing Me'irim, Chinas HaMeichin. Either you can say Me'irim, they're radiated with, or they radiate and illuminated the Chochma and Bina into Zah, V'hainu b'chinas Gadlus HaMeichin. That they're in a state of a mature mind, an expansive mind. refers us yet to another place in the Siddur, in the Maimon Shamayim Misapnim. And this is an idea we also learned earlier in this Sefer, in volume 3, about Mutva, Murgish, Muskel, the 3 levels of how Meichin grows and matures. But he's talking here, Shemeinim Bechinas HaMeichin Dechub, Gadlus HaMeichin. Okay. Well, Moshe Bechinas Atzmis HaChochma. Now he's saying, first he said Moshe was like Keser, but in this context, the Zekeinim would be more like the outer dimension, Chochma Bina, as it relates to the Midas, the Zayin, the Zah, and Moshe would be the core of Chochma. Oisha Moshe Bechinas Das, or some other places, Moshe is the level of Das. U'kamoshe Mefursum B'Kisva Arizal, as it's known, as it's quite popular, if you wish, or quite prevalent in the writings of the Arizal, the Moshe B'chinas Yesod Abba, where he brings that Moshe's Yesod in Chochma itself, Yesod, the foundational sphere of Abba of Chochma, Shu Das Elyon, which is connected to Das Elyon. I know this is right now just words that are cryptic, and I as I said, we learned this the first time, so I'm not going to go through explaining it all. But bottom line is, he's reconciling different places. Sometimes Moshe is Keser, sometimes Moshe is Atzmis Chochma. Now you say the Abba connected to Das, specifically Das Elyon. Well, who Hamachaber Bechinas Kachab?
Das is higher than Chochma, right?
And he connects Kachab as Keser Chochma Bina LeBchinas Zah to the level of Zah, which is the 7 times 10 Zekeinim, the sages. So you see here, he's bringing them all together. Keser, Chochma, Bina, Atzmis Chochma, Das Elyon, and he's connecting that, and from Moshe, it's imparted to the Zekeinim. So he didn't finish the topic yet, but basically, he's going to continue to talk about how this, ultimately, the Zekeinim is another name for the Chachamim, and that's why they have the power to establish brachas. Now, this is not disconnected from what we learned earlier, Ish Mipi Ish, that Moshe passed on generation after generation. There, he was talking more about passing on Mishneh with that clarity. Here, he's talking about the designation of blessings, which brings the clarity of the higher levels from Keser Chochma into Malchus, or is it saying so? But so it says now like this. A little more. I see there's more about Moshe for quite a while, actually. All the way to the bottom of the page, he's going to continue to talk about Moshe and the Zekeinim, but he's going to elaborate more about Moshe. Let me just see where I'll stop here. Let me see here.
Das is higher than Chochma.
It's Chochma being a Das. It depends which level of Das. Das Tachna or Das Elyon.
Das Elyon.
Well, Das is Ilaah Ada Keser. It's not higher than Chochma. It comes after Chochma, but Das is the Kavem Soyi that's connected to Keser. So there's an element of Das that reaches to the root of the source of Chochma. But as I said, that's a whole discussion of its own, which I don't want to go into right now. In this context, it could be Das is lower than Chochma. It's the level of Moshe, Das. But he says Yesod Abba is Das Elyon. So Yesod Abba is lower than Chochma itself. It's within Chochma, Das Elyon. And that connects Keser Chochma. Okay. Truth is, time is limited here. So we're still in the middle of it.
Refers to Keser?
Where he says Yesod Abba is Bechinas Das Elyon.
And okay. Yesod Abba is Keser, I guess is your point.
No, Yesod Abba is not Keser. Yesod Abba is Chochma, the Yesod of Chochma.
Uh-huh.
He's bringing different levels that Moshe can be related to. There's Moshe as is in Keser. There's Moshe Bechinas Atzmis HaChochma, which of course is rooted in Keser. Oi, Moshe is Das, like it says in Arizal, which is the level of Yesod Abba is Das Elyon. He says 3 different things on Moshe. And then he says, in general, As I said, I'm not going into, if you want to go details, I would suggest going back when I taught it the first time. Then I broke it down, explained it all in detail.
Yeah. Okay.
Here, what's really relevant is mainly the idea of the interface from the higher to the lower, to explain why the Chachamim are called Zekeinim and why they were able to be mamshich, these two levels. And he's going to continue. I'm just looking here. I want to read a little more, but the problem is the topic doesn't end till the bottom of the page, literally. Actually, till the next page, to be really honest. All this is coming to explain why the Chacham are called Einei Ha'eda. They're the eyes, and the eyes are like a interface between a higher level, bringing the level of vision and clarity to the lower levels. And brachas is one manifestation of that. That's why they were Mesak and brachas. That's the main thing we need to keep in mind. But like I said, I'm not focusing so much on the details of what is being said here, more on the bigger picture. But I refer you just simply to the classes when I discussed it, if you really want to get to the bottom of it. Okay. Let me see here. So I will read a few more lines, just a little. He'll reconcile some of these different levels. It says, "B'derech klal, in general, Moshe is Chochmas Timah, which is Chochma shebekesa." So there you go. Initially, he said it's like Keser in general. Then he said Atzmis Chochma. Then he said Yesod Abba, which is Das Elyon. In general, Moshe is the level of Chochmas Timah, which is a super consciousness that's concealed. That's Chochma shebekesed. Hainu b'chinas haChochma k'moshe dvuka adayim b'shorsha mekeda, which means Chochma, the way it's still attached and bound into its source and root and source. Like he speaks in the Maim L'Kut T'Teira that he mentioned earlier. And that's why it was difficult for him to speak. Because he wasn't Chochma as it manifests and relates to below. He was Chochma as it's attached to above. So when you're listening to your teacher and you're gazing above and connected to above, it's hard to bring it down into a state of ashpa and transmit. It's like the student is absorbing his teacher. He can't be exuding and teaching the students. So that's why it was difficult for him to speak, to be mashpia. Is this
Atzmius HaChochma? Chochma Stemo is Atzmius HaChochma?
You could say he's connected to that. Yeah, as opposed to Chochma as it's mashpia Tambina, Atzmis HaChochma is the core Chochma. Now he's calling it Chochma Shebekeser. And that's why Moshe said, Ma'ayin li bosar. That's the whole Atzilus comes from. Where do I have meat from? How can I be mashpia bosar? He's connected to the highest levels of the divine. Due to his intense level, his dense quality of his spiritual level, he cannot descend. He couldn't go down to the level of being mashpia and giving bosar, meat, to the people. And that's why Hashem said to him, and Hashem responded, Osfa, gather together the Zekeinim, Osfa miziknei Yisrael, the sages of Israel. Yesh leimer, that's the level, b'chinas meichin shebemidas. That's the meichin in midas of Zah. That was their level on their own. Before the Atzalti, before they received from the spirit of Moshe. So that was their level, meichin shebemidas. It wasn't, it was meichin within midas. We're not talking now, so we'll soon see what he says. Val derech Roshei Amatis, like when we say Roshei Amat, the leaders of the tribes, that's why it's Roshei Amata. The Matis is the Midas, and the Roshei Amatis is the Reish Shebemidas, the Meichin Midas. But and I will then impart, I will draw. It's not creation. It's like imparting from your spirit that's upon you. the spirit of the divine upon you. Hainu amshochem b'chinas atzmis hachachma. So now they are moichin shebemidus on their own. I will draw from atzmis hachachma. Oigam b'chinas chachmas timah. So here clearly you see it's not chachmas timah mamish. It's atzmis hachachma, not chachma shebemidus, moichin shebemidus, but the core of chachma, or from chachmas timah itself. Kibchinas moichin shebemidus. Let me just see. The next parentheses is a long parenthesis. I'm not going to go there right now. But bottom line, I'll say it. So now that he's calling it Atzmis HaChochma, that's why they're called Zekeinim. Like he says, that means Shekona Chochma. They acquired what? They already had Moichin, but it was Moichin in Midas. It was the Moichin that relates to emotions, to Ashpa, to another. Now they received Atzmis HaMoichin from Moshe or Chochmas Timah, and that turned them into the Ayin Zekeinim. And that gives them the power to now draw from a bracha, from the hidden worlds into the revealed worlds, as he continues to explain. But I'll read the text inside tomorrow. I'll just give you the summation of what he's saying here. So he's taken the whole parsha now and turned it into an understanding of who the Chachamim are and why they have the power to achieve, why they're called Einei Ha'eda. And not just Moshe is called. Moshe for sure was the guide and the leader. But now we're getting to that also the Zekeinim become eyes which are drawing from Etzem into a revealed way down below, which will be very relevant to understanding the role of the vision of the eyes. So I'm going to stop here. And as I said, we'll learn tomorrow more details.
And that's because they're
So they are
the
Atzmon, they
Torah,
are Moichin Shemidis, right? But what are they reaching after the word Salti?
Say again, what'd you ask?
They are Moichin Shebemidis. They are
before
Atzmon.
He says the words. He says
and
clearly.
afterwards, Salti.
Afterwards, they received Atzmis HaChochma or Chochmas Timah from Moshe.
So
my question
from higher, they received what teaching after they received from Moshe.
So now they became Zekeinim that could be Mamshich, the Bosser, and they became like the Mamutza.
But they're not reaching the Atzmus of Chochma.
They're not Moshe Rabbeinu. That doesn't say anywhere. But they now received something from Moshe. The Pasha Pshuta Shamikra. What happened? Before they were one level, they were Chachamim, and now they received from Moshe's Hamshacha, from Ruchai, but Salti min Ruch upon them. That's called like the Smicha. Like a person before Smicha and after Smicha. He's going to bring that soon. People grow.
But they are not
the Chachamim were one level, then they got to a higher level.
Right, but they didn't receive the value.
They didn't become
Moshe
Rabbeinu. No, is that what you're asking? Moshe didn't become God, and they did not become Moshe Rabbeinu. That's not a question. That's the Pshuta Shamikra. The Chacham didn't become Moshe, but they received a higher level now. What's any other questions?
Well, that was my question. I mean, the receiving from Moshe, meaning from the Pshuta Shamikra, meaning they understand the Elokus, the hidden meaning within the Mikra, at least better than we do. They're receiving the Chochma Ilaah, I guess.
That is why they're able to establish the blessings.
Yeah,
he's explaining why they have a particular power to be masakin the brachos. So he's giving an example of what the Chachamim are and why they're called Zekeinim. They have this power, this ability, this level of clarity to draw down the Riyah from the levels of Keser and Asmis HaChochma into the people.
And here, are we talking about the 70 elders or the Chazak, Razal of the Talmud?
Two separate things. He's talking the Chachamim that when Mesakin the brachas were not the 70 Zekeinim time of Moshe Rabbeinu.
Right.
But they're comparing, he's comparing these levels.
I see.
Can we say that right now we have people like them in our life that have this power?
Yes, every generation has a Moshe Rabbeinu of the generation. Every generation has leaders. Those leaders, they're not necessarily quite the same level as they were then, but relatively speaking, they're the people we go to. You go to a Rebbe, or on a smaller level, to a Mashpia, to your Rav. A Rav Paskin's halacha, he has the power of Torah to give you a Torah ruling, because he's accessing these higher levels. Now, everything is relative. Here he's talking about the Chacham, the time of Shas, Anshe Knesset Gdeli, even before Shas, and so on, or the sages during the time of Moshe. But this is in general, a general principle, that in all the generations, like you say, Moshe b'deire, Shmuel b'deire, ki Yiftach b'deire, ki Shmuel b'deire, ki Moshe b'deire. In all generations, you have relatively, there's the leaders, and they're their students and disciples. When you go to a rabbi, a legitimate authority rabbi, he is drawing down a higher level of godliness when he's pasking a halacha. So relatively speaking, this applies to everyone. He's not talking about that per se here, but if you're asking me that question, the answer is generally yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Everything clear? How is the connection today? Because I think I fixed the problem.
Much better. Much, much, much better.
Yeah. It was actually a very technical problem, which I just checked the connections. A wire was loose.
That'll do it.
Right. Okay, so we'll stop here.
Here.